Cool. Hey everyone, it's DJ, and I'm joined by my friend Zeya.
Hey.
He's currently at Harvard Business School, and he was a product manager at Dropbox with me before he went on off to school. And before Dropbox, he actually was a management consultant at Bain in San Francisco, right?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. So Zeya actually has a pretty interesting career path where he's made a number of transitions, and so I wanted to ask you just a few questions about that.
For sure.
Yeah. So you joined Dropbox from Bain, but you didn't join as a product manager, right? You actually joined the strategic finance team. What is the strategic finance team? And tell us more about how you actually ended up in that role right after Bain.
Yeah, so I think every company, every startup at a certain point realizes that they could benefit from folks with management consulting and private equity experience, but they don't really know how to use them. And so I think a lot of companies get this miscellaneous business team that's the ex-consultants and ex-finance people, and you just give them projects and they'll figure it out. And so that's what the strategic finance team was at Dropbox, right? You knew the charter of the team was really nebulous because they had to put strategy, both strategy and finance into the team name. But that was the team at Dropbox that housed all these consultants and ex-private equity folks. So when I was looking to join a tech company after Bain, this was a natural team that I would join given my skill sets.
Yeah. So why do you say that it was a natural team given your skill sets?
So I think I was, you're trying to find a team that knows how to use you.
Okay.
I think it's tough as a consultant. I think a lot of consultants, when they join an early stage company, the founders don't really know what type of work to give them to really make use of them, to be honest. And so you want to find a team that knows what to do with you for you to be able to learn properly, get the mentorship, be able to adjust from professional services to an actual company properly. And so I think it was important for me to find that sort of team versus, let me I don't know, do marketing for you, but you don't really know if I can do marketing work.
Yeah. So what were kind of the projects that you worked on the strategic finance team?
Yeah. So my first one was basically they needed a business perspective when it came to relatively large product decisions, right? There's even small product decisions can have pretty significant business impact. So for example, my first project was Dropbox in its early days really grew virally through its referral program. But there was a question of okay, at this point in time, who else are we getting through the referral program? Surely the quality of users has gone down, and we give away quite a lot of free space to the referral program. So there was a hypothesis that they actually wanted to get rid of the referral program, right? And then so I went in and kind of checked, you have to talk to the product manager, kind of look at the user data, and then do the financial modeling to see does this make sense? And then from there I moved on to other things. I did a lot of product strategy work. So for Dropbox, at that time Dropbox Pro, today Dropbox Plus, what sort of features do we launch, what segments do we target, pricing strategy. A PM thinks about all that kind of stuff, but ultimately at Dropbox you need someone from the strategic finance team to help build the business case and actually run numbers, right? That PMs might not necessarily have the time to do.
Was this similar to the type of work you did at Bain?
Not really.
Not really?
No.
Okay. So tell me more about that transition where you were at Bain, maybe a brief explanation of what you were kind of doing there.
Yeah.
And then once you joined Dropbox on the strategic finance team, what are some of the changes you had to make maybe in your own mental model or your working style? Yeah.
So at Bain, I think the joke is that you're basically working for the washed up tech companies.
Oh.
Right? By the time that a tech company is gonna be willing to pay $1 million to get 4 consultants in, I think you're maybe past your prime at that point. So I can't name clients, but you can sort of imagine, tech companies that were hot in the 80s or 90s that would hire you. And so the type of work ends up being not necessarily like super innovative, right?
Okay.
It's a lot of like performance improvement, benchmarking, or like running playbooks
Okay.
that already exist. It's not really what you would think a startup does, is like what new features can we build, or like what new markets can we enter.
Yeah.
It's like, I think you get that in the peripherals, but that's not really the core reason why companies hire consulting firms.
Yeah.
I would say. So I did work with pretty like technical company, and they were that was a different case. They were like, they wanted to expand out of their core product, and they decided to hire the consultants to help with the product development process. But I think that was more of a rarity than normality. And then, I mean, Bain is very well known in the consulting space to do private equity work. So I did a lot of private equity work.
Yeah. So how did, like, you know, from being a consultant, and sounds like the type of work you were doing at Bain wasn't necessarily one-to-one the type of work you were doing when you first joined Dropbox and the Stratfin org. Like what is it about the consulting experience or skill set that sort of enabled you to be successful in this role? And maybe even before answering that, maybe just kind of talking about like, how did you know that this was the role to go after? Because there's a bunch of different types of roles at tech companies, but just even honing in on that maybe this was the right fit for you. And also how you leverage that consulting background to get this role.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go after like why consultants or consulting experience is valuable, and why companies end up hiring a lot of consultants. I think the biggest value add is that you can be relatively sure that a consultant is intellectually high horsepower individual who needs very little supervision to get anything done, right? Like the trust is that these are institutions that have decades and decades of playbooks in how to train and manage people. And so anyone who's gone through those processes, like, you can basically throw at them any problem, completely unstructured, no guidance, and you can trust that, like, give them a couple days and they figured out how to like give that problem structure, right? Like, they've given what a good outcome looks like, and they've broken down the problem into pieces that are very digestible, and they know what data they need to dig into those pieces, and then they can go do all the analysis themselves and ultimately like come back to you with an answer. Right? Like, no matter how nebulous the process, like, they're trained to like somehow give you an answer. And especially in the startup world, where like you really don't know what you're looking for, and you might not have like real structured data, like, I think these people are pretty useful, and like, here's the problem. Can you like at least get us started on how to think about this, right? And so I think that's a very useful skill set that is like highly transferable in almost any setting. And then in terms of looking for roles, I think as someone from Bain, you're definitely not like as plugged into the startup ecosystem, right? Like a job search for maybe me and you today would look very different from a job search for me coming out of Bain. So I think...
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, like, I think consultants kind of, like, you want to work in tech, and then you... Like, I think the responsible path is like, okay, let's find some teams that have people who look like me, right? Like, so Google BizOps, obvious. It just houses all these McKinsey, Bain, BCG alumni. But if that's a team that's with that composition, like, they would probably be open to hiring you, right? Like, Facebook RPM was interesting because...
What's RPM?
Their rotational product manager program. At that time, it's targeted for new grads, but they actually saved half the spots in every single class for consultants and bankers. Right? So another example of like, maybe you don't totally know what you want, but you know that there's this program that actually targets people with your background every year. And so like, worth doing some exploring there. And then again, Dropbox, strategic finance just housed all the consultants and ex-private equity folk.
So what I'm hearing from you is, especially just as you're maybe making make a transition into tech, and if either you don't know exactly what you want, you don't know exactly how your skill set fits in. Maybe one strategy is to look at, okay, what are some of the other people like me, in your case, consultants, where are they going? What roles are they going to?
Yeah.
And maybe that's an initial start as far as how to approach your job search.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you talked about, so you're in consulting, doing strategic finance. You're working on these kind of business strategy problems. Did you think that was something that you wanted to do longer term, or how did how did you kind of come to think about wanting to move into product management?
Yeah, so I mean, I was pretty young when I made that switch. I don't think I can really say I had any clarity on what I wanted to do long term. I certainly knew I wanted to be in tech.
Okay.
So for me, if anything, the most important thing was that I would be working at a tech company and no longer doing professional services. I mean,
what were some of the other things that were important to you in a tech company as you were making that transition from consulting to tech?
Culture, super important, because I mean, I came from, I would say, the consulting firm with the best culture, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, that's the thing that the firm prides itself on. And so I came from a place that had very good culture, and I couldn't see myself really giving that up when I transitioned to tech. So, I mean, that was a huge draw of Dropbox. I think Dropbox was the most Bain-like tech company I could find.
How did you, during the interview process, how did you gain an insight into actually knowing what the culture was like before you joined?
I think, so tech companies like try to have you over at their offices and whatnot, right? Like before even formal interviewing goes on, like you'll probably have friends at those companies, and like your friends are probably trying to pull you in. So like you like visit the offices, you start talking to like friends of friends. So I think that can give you a vibe. I mean, you can go to like socials. I think tech companies are always open to having people at their socials. And then even in the formal interview process, a huge thing that tech companies are trying to do is evaluate you for culture fit, right? Yeah. And then I think that's a very mutual interaction where if one person's trying to evaluate the other for culture fit, naturally the conversation allows me to evaluate what the vibe is at the company. Yeah. So I think that's like a lot of data points that it's better than a gut feel at that point on whether you think the culture is good or not. And then I think companies with particularly good cultures get written up about. So maybe there's like a Glassdoor or a Fast Company article about how good the culture is at that company. Like that's a good sign, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What were the specific cultural aspects that you wanted in a tech company before you joined?
I wanted the people to be smart and humble. I think that's like pretty important because you don't want to be working. It's hard to work and be truly collaborative with folks who always want to be known that they're the smartest person in the room, right? Like, I think people know that that's not how work gets done. Like, you need to like figure out what the practical aspects are and like work together to resolve differences. And so you definitely want to see that. For me, like, this isn't the same for everyone, but I thought that people who wanted to hang out outside of work on the weekends was a pretty big signal, right? I think there's a lot of places that I work during the weekdays and then the weekends is my personal life, but for me at least, when I'm younger, I want to be at a place that's a bit more blurred and I can like truly be friends with my coworkers outside of work. That was pretty important. So those are the sorts of things that I tested.
Okay, cool. And so I know I threw a bunch of questions at you, but getting back to transitioning into product management, just like, why did you decide you wanted to pursue that? And then just like talk about how you actually approached that transition. Yeah,
so that thesis was built up. I mean, I'll say like my intention was not to be a PM when I joined Dropbox, right? Like I didn't take my strategic finance role as a stepping stone to be a PM. Like that's not what I was going for. It was more because I was doing so much product strategy stuff, I was interacting with pretty senior PMs like all the time. And in the same vein that I left consulting to actually work at a tech company because I wanted to be closer to the execution, it was very clear that, even though I was closer to the execution than before, like PMs themselves were closer to the execution than I was as someone on strategic finance working on product strategy. And so it went on for like a year, you know, like I'm just like always in meetings with PMs trying to like help them figure out problems. And then like every day I was like, why don't I just be a PM myself?
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea that like incubated over time, and eventually there was a pretty natural point of my time on Stratford. I was like, I should probably like make clear my desire to move into the product org.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So you just there's a lot of people that want to become product managers.
Sure.
And you actually wrote a great Medium post on Product Coalition about basically how to become a PM.
Yeah.
I get I'm sure you do too. I get a lot of questions about, how do I become a PM?
Yeah.
I actually end up sending your article probably twice a week and just say, hey, just read this.
Yeah.
Just what did you write about? Why did you write it? And just tell us more about that piece you wrote, which I'll link to at the bottom of this and send it out as well.
So the basic premise of that piece was, I don't know, just like some cookie cutter advice, I think, for people from non-technical backgrounds trying to move into product management. And then the highlight takeaway from that piece, I guess, is like there's 3 paths to PM, right? You were already a PM, you founded a startup, or you internally transferred from a different team at that company.
Yeah, which is both of us.
Right.
Yeah.
And probably all of my consultant friends who are now PMs did that third path. And you'll notice that none of these 3 are straight from consulting to PM or straight from private equity to PM. That just isn't a path that really happens that often. But
why do you think so?
The role experience fit isn't right, right? I think it's very useful for a PM to already understand the product that they're going to be working on. I think this is why internal transfers work really well, because people who've already been working at that company already understand generally what the product is about, major user pain points, how to get work done at that company. That's pretty important as a PM, knowing folks in the company, having a network inside of the company. That's very important in terms of how PMs get work done. Right. So I think those are reasons why internal transfers work, and you don't really see someone coming straight from Bain or McKinsey having those in their toolkit, right? So I think that's why it's tough. Also, the supply demand just doesn't make sense, right? If you have someone who previously worked in consulting and is already at your company wanting to be a PM, why would you take someone externally who only has consulting experience? So it's just tough from a supply demand side to justify making those sorts of hires. And the reason I ultimately wrote the piece was, as you said, I mean, you send it out 2 or 3 times a week. I don't know how many pings I was getting. I was trying to be a nice guy, and I made time to have calls and coffees with people who were reaching out, but it got to a point where it was just too much. And huge PM skill in the interest of scaling yourself. I was I just need to put this all in writing. So I can send this out instead of having to use 30 minutes multiple times a week repeating the same thing. So that was the motivation for writing that piece.
And so you talk about basically just internally transitioning into PM. What are some of the either tactics or things that you had in mind as you were trying to transition yourself?
I think there's a lot of there's a diverse set of backgrounds that internal transfers are, right? It's not like we weren't on the same team. We were doing very different things. Basically, I think almost anyone on any team can internally transfer to PM, just because PM is that diverse of a role. So there's a case to be made in almost any direction. I think the thing that is common amongst everyone, regardless where they came from, is that they had previously worked very directly with a PM. Right? So those people naturally have a very real understanding of what the job entails. And so at that point, if you really know what a PM does and you still want to do it, because it's not all glory,
Yeah.
right?
Not at all.
So if you still want to do it after seeing someone pretty close up, then I think there's a better case to be made there in terms of why you want to be a PM. And then again, by having that work experience, you probably have an internal champion who can walk you through the company process. So naturally, I think that's probably like the number one thing.
Sure.
I think it does help to express your interest explicitly, right? Like help others help you. Like if you want to make the transfer internally, like the other PMs at the company can't really help you unless they know that's what you want to do. And so I brought it up with both my managers on strategic finance, but as well as my peers who were in the PM org. Like I let everyone know. And then the final piece is probably volunteering. So I did this, people did this with me when I was a PM, but like carve out some time or even like be willing to work a bit more and like volunteer yourself onto a project to give some PMs some leverage on their time. Like I think a pretty common one is doing analytics for them. Right? I think every company's probably strapped for analytics resources. So if you actually know how to like go into the SQL database, and like you tell a PM, hey, whatever your experiment you're running, like I'll do the analytics for it, so you can spend more of your time speccing. No one's gonna say no, and like again, you're working directly with a PM. You're good, if you do a good job, you're gonna have an internal champion. Like all of that works out. So.
I definitely resonate with you. Just thinking back to my own transition, something I really want to highlight is how Zeya mentioned, making it easy for other people to help you. And I found this especially at Dropbox, where just making it known to others and your manager in a tactful way that, hey, maybe product management is something that I'd like to pursue. And then and just because you say that doesn't mean they're gonna like make room for you or just like immediately give you what you want. But then in addition to that, finding additional projects that you can add value to actually demonstrate that it's some part of the skill set you can actually do and help out, and then doing that allows you to just like find an internal champion, right? And I think that's really big, because no matter how smart you are or how hard you work, it's you just on those things alone, you're not gonna like get the job. Cool. So tell me more about like what as a PM at Dropbox, what were some of the products that you worked on, and talk to us more about like what you learned as far as like what makes a PM effective.
So I started off working on a pretty technical project, like something probably more technical than someone with my background was supposed to be working on.
What were you working on?
I had to integrate our content management system. And so like deeply technical, especially with something like Dropbox that already has a somewhat convoluted technical architecture, having to like take a third-party solution and fit that into like our meta server and our analytics suite without violating any security protocols was way more technical than I needed it to be. And so that's where I started, and I mean, it was probably a good thing that happened, but ultimately at Dropbox, I ended up focusing my time on efforts under the umbrella of subscription growth. So just trying to figure out by almost any means possible how we can get more paying users, whether that be on Dropbox Plus or Dropbox Business, on iOS, Android, web, just like the scope was literally anything. And so that's where I spent like over a year just trying to figure out how to make Dropbox more money.
Well, we appreciate you for that. But you've moved on now, so you're at Harvard Business School. Just like what's the either the sentiment or the view at business school about just wanting to work in tech in general?
It's definitely a popular career path, right? Especially at a time when tech is so hot. You have quite a few folks from consulting and finance backgrounds who are using business school to try to make that pivot, and then naturally, like the sorts of folks who attend business school, like a role like PM is exactly what they're looking for. Right. So there is quite a lot of interest in PM, but again, going back to my article, MBAs aren't one of the three main feeders for
Yeah.
PMs, but I think that's something that the people at business school, like, you know, you're on campus, you start to figure that scene out, and then there are paths to get there, right?
Yeah.
You have 2 years, you have internships, so I think the folks at business school are maneuvering that scene right now, trying to see how they can set themselves up for, say, a PM role when they graduate.
Yeah, so you're also part of the tech club at HBS, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure people, and we were talking about this earlier, people come to you to ask, to pick your brain about getting into tech, whether that's just industry or PM.
Yeah.
What are some of the conversations that you have with your fellow business school classmates about, you know, tech or PM roles?
They're pretty similar to the conversations I had back in the day with like consultants trying to move into PM. I think there's a bit more like describing what are these sorts of roles there are at tech companies, because I think these people are they are aware of like what the supply demand dynamics are, and like even if PM is like really their top choice, they're still like open to like biz ops and product marketing, and so I think one part of it's like learning about all the roles that exist where an MBA skill set could be valuable. And then another one's thinking about, you know, I think maneuvering tech recruiting is extremely nebulous compared to like finance or consulting recruiting, right? Like every consulting firm is at the core the same thing, and then they come and chase you. Like you just have to be there. Like you don't really have to do anything else. Versus with tech, you really have to figure out like what are you looking for, right? Like even just like the stage of company will drastically affect your experience and like at the end of the day, your happiness level. Like what type of product are you working on? Do you want to do B2B or B2C? Like what type of monetization model do you want? Right? I think those are all things that you have to think about when you're looking at tech companies that you don't think about in more traditional career paths.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that tech recruiting is nebulous. Like tell me more about that. Like why do you say that? And what advice do you give to your MBA classmates about actually like navigating that path to finding the right job for them?
There's just no formal processes until you're at the scale of like Facebook and Google. There's just like no dedicated human being time spent on how do we hire MBAs, right? That just like doesn't exist. And so it's really up to the candidate to like find out what companies they're interested in, figuring out like who they can reach out to, and starting the conversation for the company to be like, oh, does it make sense to hire this person? And so that's why it's nebulous. And then when that is your task, it's very daunting. Like I think it's very easy to be like, I don't even know where to start. Right? Like
so maybe like let's walk through just like an example, right? So if you're an MBA and what are some of and you want to break into tech, let's say you have a consulting background. What are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself, and some of the things that you should be considering in the company to then actually get to, okay, maybe I've settled on a role in a company. How do I actually get into the pipeline for the interview process?
So step number one is filtering yourself down to find like a set of companies that you're interested in, right? I think the two biggest filters are size of company and geography. That'll get you down a lot, and then type of product probably like gets you another pretty good chop down.
Do you mean like business B2B or B2C?
Or that's one aspect of it. But even in B2C, like, do you want to be doing social media, or do you want to be doing like e-commerce subscriptions? Like, I think you can filter down your interests pretty narrowly by doing that. And that should hopefully, like, those major filters get you down to a more digestible number of companies. Like I would guess maybe like 20 to 40 you should get down to at that point. And then at that point you can actually just read about those companies, right? Like articles, their websites, and you should be able to eliminate the ones that you clearly wouldn't want to work at. And I think the goal is probably to get down to 5 to 10 companies that you then look in LinkedIn to see like what connections you have to those companies, and then start reaching out from there.
And so, you know, a lot of times there aren't these like like specific roles for MBA. There's no, many companies don't have like, oh, you're an MBA, we just use you anywhere.
Yeah.
What about trying to figure out, I have my list of companies I'm interested, but how do I figure out what roles to apply for, or what roles that would be a good fit for me?
Yeah, I think again, biz ops, product marketing, like even if there are no MBAs at the company, like see what roles at companies of a similar stage that past MBAs have taken on. I think hopefully you can find someone at the company who like has had experience working at another company that did hire MBAs, so they're more familiar with like how to manage that talent pipeline. And so I think those are like, it's very nuanced at that point, right? But I think those are the sorts of things that you can do to figure out how you can fit.
So you are halfway through your first year, right? And so this summer, got to find an internship, right? So for someone who maybe didn't have a background in tech and they're wanting to get into tech, what do you suggest they just approach this internship season to set themselves up for success and getting a job in tech after graduation?
For an internship, you probably want something structured. Like you...
Does that mean going after like bigger companies?
Yeah, I'm thinking bigger companies that have had experience dealing with MBAs. Optimally, they've previously had MBA interns, but actually, like, as long as I think there's an MBA on the team, they'll know like how to create a program for you or whatnot. But I think it could be a bit of a strange experience if you've never worked in tech to just like sit at like some startup office with like there's like 15 people, you're there, like.
Trying to figure out what
10
to do.
weeks, and they're like, "Who is that guy?" And then you're like, "Oh, is there any work you can give me?" Like that's not what you want to be doing to the company, right? You want to be like very proactive and not really detracting from anyone's time. And you also want to have an environment where they're helping you learn. And so I think that's where a structure helps a lot. And even if you know you want to do something a bit smaller, like a Facebook or a Google Summer can't hurt, right? In terms of like. Even just like living in San Francisco is like another thing that you have to deal with because like this is a very peculiar city in itself. So I think it's just nicer and easier to manage all those variables when you have a structured program.
Got it. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for your time. Is there anything else? Any last parting words of wisdom, either for MBA students or people wanting to transition into tech?
I think maybe be patient.
Be patient.
Like, especially if you're set on a PM role. I think I heard a joke from a PM the other day that he could probably step onto any intersection in Soma and just yell, "My company has an open PM role," and get a bunch of applicants in that moment. And so the market dynamics right now are just tough. And if that's something you really want to do, again, it doesn't have to be your first job out of consulting and MBA, and arguably having some other experience in tech makes you a better PM when you get there. So it's not a rush.
Got it. Actually, one last question. Are there any bad pieces of either career advice related to tech or PM that you have either read or seen or heard floating around that you want to call out?
I think maybe to the vein of what I just said, I don't think you should take a PM job at any cost.
Okay.
Right? Maybe there's again, going back to market dynamics, turns out that like a company that is about to blow up is happy to hire a PM who's never been a PM before. Like on one hand, that makes you a PM. On the other hand, is that going to be a great PM experience?
By blow up, just want to clarify,
blow up in the bad way.
Blow up in the bad way.
You got the PM title, but did you really learn, and is that really going to set you up for a longer term stint as a PM? I don't really know. The other thing I wrestle with when it comes to career advice is I think there's one camp of people who say join a fast growing company in like whatever role. Like when you see a rocket ship, just get on the rocket ship, right? And then there's another set of people who I think prescribe the manager you work for is much, much more important, and that's what you should be optimizing for.
Yeah.
I really think it's when you see a rocket ship, get on the rocket ship.
Got it.
It is just so risky to bet your career on another person, especially in tech, where like it's very possible that that person leaves like 3 months after you've joined the company.
Yeah.
Or like, so unless that person's name is like Sheryl Sandberg or something, like I just have a hard time like betting yourself on another human being.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for your time.
Yeah, man.
And
thanks for having me.
Hopefully this was useful to everybody. All right. Have a good one.
Take care.